Hello, how are y'all this afternoon? 2 o'clock on a Monday. We've made it this far. This is a good sign. We just have a few things to talk about today. Y'all haven't had a chance to read anything. I hope you have um, been able to find the syllabus online. Nice to meet you too. We're gonna have a good time this semester, and that's something that's very important. I just want to say to y'all, relax and enjoy yourself and learn something for the sake of learning it and not get all upset and agonized about uh oh, I've got to pass this, and oh well, I you, you're gonna be fine. Texas requires, if you're gonna get a degree here, that you have 6 hours of government. And I'm always amazed at how people think that's weird. And you can graduate from an Ivy League institution and never have had a history class or a government class, and that's really sad. But there we are. In Texas, after World War I, the legislature passed a law requiring that college educated kiddos get take 6 hours of government. And the purpose was to teach democracy. It's not to teach comparative government where all systems are treated the same and people obsess about the details of how those systems are structured. No, no, it's not there. Yeah, somebody said it's interesting to take this class during an election year. Well, fortunately for us, there's usually an election going on. You have off year elections. And by the way, my cats are up here, and I have cats and dogs, and the cats are up here, and they're going to they're playing, so they're making a lot of noise. They're going to disturb us. The yard people came and mowed a while ago, which is good. That they won't interrupt us while we're trying to work. But I was just going to say to you, babies cry, repairmen come, all kinds of things happen while we're talking this class. So y'all just relax. It's going to be all right. But yeah, it's fun to take this class in an election year because you don't have to go out and seek strenuously political information. It's on your doorstep. It's every time you turn the television on. And frankly, y'all, well, I've always been a news person, always been a news junkie. And so I read the newspaper all the time, or I watch television news all the time. But there is such a wealth of information, some of it poor, that it's hard to hide from political information now. I'm sure you know people who don't follow politics, though. I'm sure you're aware of people who don't. And those 10% of possible voters, maybe they're not registered to vote, and that's okay too. But it's the undecideds that are going to decide this election. Think about how weird that sounds. Your undecideds, people who don't know the difference between, you know, apple pie or lemon pie, can't decide about dessert. They just, they can't decide. Or they don't know the difference between, Ford and Chevy. They don't know if it's going to be a pickup or an SUV. They can't make decisions. They can't make their minds up about things. Those are the people who are going to decide who your next president is. Government is so evenly divided now, and people are so bombarded with information that it may have the opposite effect, that they may be less informed than more informed. I do know that people who look at different kinds of media, like they look at TikTok or they look at Instagram, but they don't read a major newspaper, those people are not as informed. Just because they're touching media doesn't mean that they know anything about government. And there are people who do follow politics, but could not tell you anything about public policy, couldn't tell you how government works, couldn't tell you how a bill becomes law, but they're all about, well, did you hear what she said? Did you hear what he said? You know, and that's not, I don't think that's healthy either. But anyway, yeah, it's a very interesting time, but it's a terrifying time. There are changes in our lives that I did not anticipate. I think COVID attacked more than just people, it attacked institutions. And so the things that we trusted, that we counted on, weren't available to us. And I think that people are grieving still and are not having that conversation about grief. I think people are very angry and very disappointed, and that's driving their politics. And I can assure you, this is not normal. The way people are making about something are just not really normal right now. I'm gonna real quick, everybody. I'm not muted now. This is good. Okay. So this is not normal politics. There were times when either candidate, and I know when I say this, you're not going to believe me because you've lived through this time. There were times when I knew who I was going to vote for, and that was the person I voted for. But if I lost and the other candidate won, it was not a catastrophe. That the entire form of American government did not change. That's not true anymore. There are people who do not wish this country to be a democracy any longer. Authoritarian governments are more efficient. There's less pushback to their agendas. And don't let the sound of my voice let you think that I think that those things are okay. Democracies are messy. Democracies are full of conflict. Democracies are about people giving each other the space to disagree. There are people who don't like that. There are people who want order and they want to tell other people how to find that order, how to live their lives. And there's no wonder, y'all, that, well, let me put it to you this way. The differences between these two campaigns, I know in 2016, the differences between the two campaigns were intense. In 2020, the differences between the campaigns were intense. I've always been aware that there are differences between campaigns, but the differences between this campaign in 2024 and say, you know, 1968 may not have been as intense. This is different because literally the form of government will change. You will have a completely different government structure. You're not going to bother with constitutional amendments to change that. You don't need a constitutional amendment if everybody agrees about something. So the executive branch will be in charge of much more in government. The courts will rubber stamp what the executive does. The courts have already given the executive tremendous immunity. That I grew up with Nixon. I knew that the president could be prosecuted for criminal activity. I knew that the president was not above the law. So this spring, when we learned that there were places that the president could have immunity, things, as Bob Dylan says, times they are a-changing. Things are really, really different. I never in my life thought that the 1965 Voting Rights Act would disappear. But when I first started teaching 40 years ago, I knew with the Reagan administration that the drumbeat to abolish reproductive rights was real. And if you think that that's over with, we'll let them have abortion and they'll be all right and they'll leave us alone. That's not how it works. I am not being dramatic. I'm not hyperbolizing here when I tell you that there is a very real likelihood that birth control pills will no longer be on the market. That's not going to happen this year, but it could happen next year. There are people on the Supreme Court right now who do not believe that you have a constitutional right to birth control pills. I don't know if you realize this, but you had to go to the Supreme Court to get the right to ingest birth control pills. Just because they're on the market doesn't mean you have a right to it. Griswold versus Connecticut, a very important civil rights case that gave married couples the ability.
Oh, yes, he's like, she's cute, but I don't know what she looked like. Like, obviously, I look good from the outside, and D was like, oh. And then he's like, hey, he asked D, he's like, have you seen? He's like, not gonna lie, no. But he asked, so he told me. And he was like, oh, he's like, yeah, but I'm not looking for a relationship either, though. But she cute. Yeah. I'm like him. I'll say my name. Right?
Griswold versus Connecticut is an important Supreme Court case. Griswold versus Connecticut, because it gave married couples the ability to get a prescription for birth control pills. Single women would not get the ability to ingest birth control pills until the early 70s. And what we know now is, and what we've always known, is that what the Supreme Court giveth, they can taketh away. And so there are people right now on the Supreme Court who do not see a constitutional right to privacy. And that's where the right to take birth control pills comes from. And I know you're thinking, well, you know, there are other reasons to take birth control pills. I mean, there are health reasons, you know. These folks aren't interested in that. And so they can say, no birth control pills. They're already redefining in vitro fertilization. They're opposed to that. And so we'll be taking a look at the different political parties' platforms. You know what a platform is. You stand on a platform, you stand on a stage. Well, what you stand on is your party's platform. And so both parties have platforms that they wrote at their conventions. And they're published. And you can find them readily online. And I'll have a link for you to see those platforms. They're really lengthy, and that's a big turnoff that it takes so much effort to read them. But that's kind of the plan, isn't it? That they're hoping you won't read them. They're just hoping that, you know, like that shiny new car, you know, do you want that Ford or do you want that Chevy? They want simple responses. And this is much more complex than that. Much more complex than that. So we'll take a look at those platforms and what the implications of them are. They're pretty clear about what they want to do. They're pretty straightforward about it. And that's really interesting. So catchphrases and cute little phrases and name calling and all, that's what I'll put it to you this way. It's a good expression for you to remember. It's the heat and not the light that gets the attention. The heat and not the light. And what I mean by that is the hotter somebody's comments are, the more you can predict that those will be the headlines in the newspaper, and that'll be all that what the television anchors are talking about is whatever phrase, whatever, whatever cute remark, whatever ugly remark, whatever biting remark, that's what's going to get the attention, and not these political party platforms, which really become the basis of our government. I think this is the most difficult thing we'll talk about all semester, and we might as well get it up front, get it out of the way. The most difficult thing we're going to talk about is I find that students have a difficult time seeing that other people have different political views than they do. Many people walk through the world thinking, oh, education's good. We should have a free public education. How could anybody be against public schools? There are. Public schools are just not a given. People had to fight to get those. And there are attacks on them. People want to move to a voucher system, taking tax money to send kids to private schools and not have public schools anymore. What I'm driving at is that people don't realize that people see the world differently than they do. It's like saying, people don't see the differences between political parties. They dismiss them by saying, well, they're all crooks. They're just all crooks. That way you don't have to do any homework. You don't have to do anything thinking. You can just dismiss everyone, be negative about it, and not make any smart choices about your leadership or, more importantly, your public policy. So I find that students have a difficult time realizing that there are different interest groups with different views about the amount of resources that should be devoted to their particular issue. I'll give you an example, a personal example about this. Now, I've been sick this past week, and had I not been vaccinated, tremendous, 6, 7 vaccines. If I had not been vaccinated, it would have been a lot worse. My doctor said, yeah, you'd be on a ventilator. Be a lot worse. I grew up getting vaccinated for everything at school. Measles, in the Great Society programs, we got shots at school. And everybody took them. There was no controversy about how important vaccines were. But somebody with an agenda wrote an article saying that vaccines cause autism. They most certainly do not. But because of that well-known person's family name, people took them seriously, and people stopped vaccinating their kids. I don't know if y'all realize this or not, but polio is making a big comeback. Polio. I had to tell students what polio was when I was talking about FDR. had no idea what polio was. And that's a good thing. But it is making a big comeback, and we're having to vaccinate kids the world over because a well-known person said, well, you know, I don't know about these vaccines. That fascinates me in that we can know the science of something, but our world has become so politicized and bad information is so readily acceptable or accessible, I should say it that way. People read this stuff and they believe it. I think what all of this really boils down to, and this is a theme that I will give you again and again this semester, it's a fear of modernity. It's a fear of modern life. The most important thing that came for our concept of self-government and our education system, those things are in sympathy, is that period of time known as the Enlightenment. That period of time known as the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment is under siege right now. The idea that we can be logical and rational and not emotional, that we can make our own decisions about our own destiny, that we can self-govern. And I mean that as a society can self-govern, and as an individual we can self-govern. All of those concepts are really under siege. I just did not anticipate that I would be this age and having to explain the faulty reasoning and faulty logic. Some people now believe that women should not have the right to vote, that men as head of household should do all the voting. Think about the amount of population that that would impact. Think about how fundamentally wrong it is. Think about how we are saying that there's a second class of people. They shouldn't have the right to vote. My first class this morning, there's an article, and I'll post it for you so that you can see it, so like you can see what they're up to too, about voter intimidation in Texas, about the police, law enforcement officials bearing warrants, showing up at people's homes at 6 o'clock in the morning and saying, where are you hiding those voter registration forms? They went through these people's underwear drawers, their pajamas, their bathrooms. Clearly what's not specified on the warrant, right? But it's intimidation. You could not do this, y'all, if the Voting Rights Act was enforceable. But the Supreme Court's abolished the sections for enforcement of the Voting Rights Act. The Justice Department should be all over this, saying, what is this voter intimidation nonsense? Why are you going to women's houses at 6 o'clock in the morning, 87-year-old women who've worked in campaigns all their lives, and trying to intimidate them? I didn't anticipate this. I did not anticipate the problems with education. I did not anticipate the problems with voter rights, with women's rights, with equality. But here we are. Why are we here is a very important question. I was a Kennedy Johnson child. We went to the moon. We went forward. We believed in science. We had very strong science education. The books that I read and had access to at my junior high library are banned by many Texas school districts now. Banned. Wow. I just don't recognize large segments of our society. Book banning is just, well, to coin a phrase, y'all, it's weird. This lack of a belief in science, it's weird. It's just odd to me. It's just strange. It's like from another planet. But here we are. Why? A fear of modernity, a fear of modern life, a fear that people cannot be controlled if they can read for themselves. If you can read for yourself, you can think for yourself. This is a frightening time period. And so I don't want to put any pressure on y'all or anything, but frankly, Western democratic thought is on the line here, and you got to do your part. You got to take government class, because the legislature, in its wisdom after World War I, when lots of Texas kids went off to fight in World War I, they got worried that they would encounter all those ideas out there: socialism, communism. They really showed a lack of faith in democracy. But one thing they did do was they said college students should learn about democracy in a sophisticated approach. And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to spend time on fundamental ideas. And some of this is, you're going to say, yeah, I know that. But I want to give you the reasons for why we know that. I want to give you the reasons for why we have self-government and why that's not a strange idea to you, or the reasons that we think about our natural environment the way that we do, and therefore think that there are natural laws that not only govern our planet, but govern us too. Why do y'all take economics? Why do y'all take psychology or sociology or anthropology? All of those things are products of the Enlightenment. And so your liberal arts education, which is denounced, by the way, in many circles in our country now. People are really afraid of women going to college. Have you noticed? You know why? Women outnumber men at colleges and universities now. Why then are we going to make it harder for women to control their own bodies? Well, if you can do that, then there's no reason for them to go to college, because they're just going to get pregnant anyway, right? These things are interconnected. These things are interwoven. It's much easier to control people when they do not have the ability to engage in independent thought or independent healthcare. If they can't take care of themselves, then they have to be taken care of. And that's a real risk right now. So we are going to take a look at this, because our goal is teaching democracy, not supporting the concepts of, say, totalitarianism or authoritarianism and those things, or fascism. And those things are making a huge comeback. Russia is an authoritarian fascist oligarchy. That's a lot of words there, that oligarchy thing. I always have, when I look at that word, I think I can't say it. So I just have to make that leap. And oligarchy. Oh, okay, I said it. It's hard for me to say that word. But totalitarian government, where the government tells you, this is the job you're going to have, this is the education you're going to have. You know, can you imagine the pressure on somebody who's not good at math, but who's channeled in that direction? Makes my palms sweat. Just, I don't do math. And so I went to law school, not medical school, and there's a reason, because I can't do math. But There are plenty of people who will tell you how they want you to live. And what made a huge difference in my life was the ability to make my own living and to have an education. Without that education, Dad and Mom had high school diplomas and were unskilled workers. They were laborers. The last 25 years of my dad's life, he owned a lawn service. My mom has always been a manager of real estate properties or an accountant type person, but without the credentials. So they were always kind of subject to the whims of other people, and it meant that they were underemployed. It meant that they often stayed in jobs where they were truly miserable, truly unhappy. And it was very much a part of my upbringing. Was the only thing that's going to change anything for you is to go to college, because we don't know anybody that'll just give you a job. You know, we don't know anybody in banking that's just going to say, here, you can be vice president of diagonal parking over here at the bank, and here's your ticket to success. No, so I had to go to college. And it made all the difference. The road that I had to travel made all the difference. The places I went, the people I met, the financial aspects of this. And so it's very important for you to understand the worth and the value of your education. But largely that education would not have occurred if it had not been for Western political thought and the Enlightenment. Because many of us were considered second-class citizens, not worth educating. Why would you want her to go to school? She's just gonna have babies. Changing diapers, you don't need to be real smart for that. Wow. So don't get discouraged. Don't give up. Look forward. But make notes about when people are critical and how comfortable people are now about getting in your business, telling you how to live. Think about that. I've thought about y'all maybe keeping a political journal and see how your observations change and develop over the semester, how maybe you didn't think about that before, and now we're talking about it in school. So what should you do? Well, y'all, it's never occurred to me before, but what y'all were calling assignments, I think of as exams. There are 3 exams and 1 discussion question, but your assignment, what you're supposed to be doing with your time, is reading that dang textbook. And there's a lot of it. And some of it's really boring. I'm like, whoa, I wouldn't have written that. That's boring. So it's probably good for insomnia, you know, take a crack at it before you go to bed. There are worksheets that you should take a look at so that you know what you're responsible for learning, that you might see this key term on a test. Now, I love vocabulary, and I to this day make little notes about, oh, this word, ooh, that's nice. You know, what's this mean? What's the context? What's the etymology of this word? What's its origins? Why that word? Where does it come from? What's the Latin basis for it? What I want you to know is, what is the significance of terms like self-government? Why is it significant? What is the Enlightenment? Those are things that we're going to dwell on, because it's the basis of the Constitution. The basis of the Constitution. The Constitution does not make a whole heck of a lot of sense. That you actually have someone saying to you, you have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's a very radical notion when people were so closely tied to the land that the serf the king could come along and say, I like that house. Well, thank you. It was my parents' house and we built it ourselves. And well, then give it to me. And people had no legal recourse about that. It also is a tremendous contradiction that somebody who said you have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and he owned other human beings. It's like ashes in my mouth. How can that be? So as we are working our way through this Constitution, working our way through the structure of government, you're going to see contradictions. That's where the real learning takes place. Not the easy part, not the part that you can memorize, but the part that gives you a physiological reaction. That's where learning takes place. That's where your growth and your development is going to take place. And no, we are not going to keep the worst parts of our story a secret. It's not healthy. It gets banned in some states. People are afraid to talk about slavery. They treat it like it was some kind of job opportunity. I mean, the offense and the ignorance is breathtaking. So we have to talk about those parts of the documents where we say that somebody's 3/5 of a person. And we have to talk about the fact that some people aren't mentioned at all. And why haven't we fixed that? I never thought that we needed a constitutional amendment to say that the president was not above the law. But evidently we do. I didn't think that we might need to change the number of the people who were on the Supreme Court from 9 to 13. But we might. And I'll give you a quick argument for why. When we expanded the federal court system a few years ago, we did it because of growth in population and that the workload of 9 circuits, it couldn't be done. You could not handle the volume if you only had 9 circuits. So we figured out to have 13. If you had 13 circuits, spread that work out a little bit more. But what we didn't do was give 13 justices. I don't know if y'all know this, but one of the duties of a Supreme Court justice is the supervision of emergency appeals from the circuit that they're over, that they're tied to as a consulting, as a gateway for like death row appeals, emergency death row appeals. Well, some of the justices are having to double up and do 2 circuits because there are 9 justices and not 13. So it seems to me if there are 13 circuits, we ought to have 13 justices to handle the volume of work. I never thought that we would need a constitutional amendment to term limit Supreme Court justices. And if that sounds weird to you, I mean, I know we're taught, well, the reason you don't have term limits is so that they can be more free about their decisions and not be worried that they'd be kicked off the court. Or bankruptcy judges only serve 19 years and they're federal judges and they're appointed by the president and subject to Senate confirmation, and they get it over in 18 years and then they go on about their lives. Okay, so there goes that argument that somebody can't be a good judge if they have a term limit. Of course they can't. Presidents do good work and they have a term limit. So maybe our ability to adapt and to change when facing modern life is what keeps democracy moving forward. But when people are afraid weird stuff happens. When people don't understand something, the brain is wired to make understanding possible. I'll give you an example. The murder of President Kennedy when I was 18 months old was so awful that people did not understand how one person could change the world just like that. And there were really bad mistakes in the investigation of that murder. Really bad. The police, well, the government's own report said, man, the Secret Service did a poor job. All those open windows on that parade route, all those buildings with no snipers on top of them in a known hostile place. Dallas could change their name to hostile, a known hostile place. He wasn't very well protected. And there had been lots of threats. Hell, there was a threat in the newspaper that morning. The Dallas police, oh my gosh, what a mess. They allowed all those people in that basement. They allowed Jack Ruby in there, who shot the leading suspect, Lee Harvey Oswald. People could not understand how messed up this was. I mean, it's mind-boggling. So the mind does try to understand. It invents conspiracy theories to fill in the blanks. To fill in the blanks. And why is that? Because people want an answer and they fear a world where we're not quite sure what's going to happen next. Sometimes when I watch movies with y'all can be like little kids and say, what's going to happen? The anxiety of just watching a movie that makes you a little uncomfortable. Y'all been with little kids that do that? What's going to happen next? Well, I think the whole country is going through what's going to happen next. We're really stressed right now. Y'all are going to school at one of the most difficult times. What a walk in the park it was for me to be in college 40 years ago. 40 years ago this year, I graduated undergrad. And we lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis, we lived through the president's murder, we lived through the civil rights turmoil, we came through that, we lived through Bobby's murder, we lived through Dr. King's murder, but we kept trying. We kept trying. I think COVID really changed people. And the fear of death on people's doorsteps from illness really, really changed people. And I don't think we're having that conversation. I also think that there was such tremendous disappointment in 2016 when there was going to be, for the first time in Western democratic society, a female commander-in-chief, that people went through a kind of mourning, a kind of shock. How could this be? What a rejection of our values, our Western political values. She won the popular vote. I want you to remember that. More people voted for her. She lost the Electoral College. We had the same thing happen in the year 2000. More people voted for Al Gore, but he lost Florida by 537 votes. Because they didn't count all the votes. Because they stopped counting the votes. And there's a film I want you to watch about that called Unprecedented. And it explains how thousands of ballots were thrown out because people did what's called an overvote. They punched 2 holes instead of 1. So you couldn't count the. Why? Because if you draw the ballot where it's confusing, then you can change the outcome of an election. And I know you think, why would anybody want to do that? Why would anybody want to undermine an election like that? Because you can't win it any other way than to draw the ballot where it confuses voters. Because you've got no issue. No one supports your public policy, but you got all this campaign money around you to spend, and all this resentment and grievances, and pardon the slang here, all this butt hurt that you have to do something with. And so it gets played out in this ugliness in which we're moving through. It's interesting. Yes, it is interesting, but it's important to the fabric of the being of Western democratic ideas that you have fair and honest elections, that there be candidates that the public can support, and candidates that the public can reject. You don't have just one candidate on a ballot like you do in Stalinist Russia, or people, are murdered because they don't vote for the government's candidate like Putin. Or if you dare to question Putin publicly, he puts you in prison and you're murdered. Most popular way there is to throw him out the window. If you control information in those societies, then government can govern any way that it wants. And that is a violation of our Western political thinking. So when you guys get that taste of ashes in your mouth, or when you get physically uncomfortable when we're talking about this stuff, that's because it goes against your Western political, the fiber of your being, that you have a right to control your own destiny, that you're a free person, that no one is going to tread on you, that you're going to control your body. That's why you have such a violent, visceral reaction. And it's important to talk about that. I think that that's why you had people last week cry spontaneously, just cry, because they thought, well, I haven't felt physically good about this, and this is a relief. People can be that emotional about politics. It is not it's not a spectator sport. You're kind of in it or not. Kind of in it or not. So what are we going to do? Well, I'm not sure what our discussion question is going to be, but the first things we're going to start talking about are the origins of the Constitution. So that's the first chapters for you to start looking at. And you don't have to commit every word to memory by Wednesday. Okay, that's not healthy. Let's work our way through this. I have a couple of housekeeping things I need to ask you. Do y'all want to meet on Monday and Wednesday? Do you feel that you would benefit from lectures on both days, or do you need a day to regroup? Or look at it this way. If you don't come to class, that is your affair. You're an adult. So if you have a doctor's appointment that day, go to the doctor. Take care of yourself. Take care of your life. Don't think you have to be here in front of the screen every day, because I take these and I will post them. And if you have questions about them, email me. I'm here for you. All right? That's what I do. No question's a bad question. If you do ask questions on the tape, you're helping at least 10 other students who have the same question, who might be too shy to ask, right? So if you want to be here on Monday and Wednesday, we can do that. That's fine. And if I had to ask, and somebody said they had a question. Let me look at the chat. New messages. For the first exam, what chapters does it cover? Look on the first module. Look at Unit 1, Module 1. The book, you're already linked to the book, and the book is free. But you don't have, now, if you want a hard copy of it, you can buy a hard copy of that 700-page book for about $50. And where did I get mine? Did I buy mine online? I can't remember if I bought it online or I bought it from on Amazon, or did I buy it from Barnes and Noble? I can't remember, but I think I paid $50 for it. But you could print whatever chapters you thought you needed if you need to work off of paper, because some people really like paper and don't like to read on a screen. But the book is free and you're already keyed to it. If you will look at your modules on Canvas, y'all, and click, it'll take you right to the chapter where you're supposed to read. Do y'all have any idea how long it took me to do that? Oh, please. So use it. Okay, it's there for you. All right. Any other kind of housekeeping questions? Open note, open book, open internet. I don't believe in hiding the ball. I want you to work at finding the answer. All right. You get 3 opportunities to take a test. And yeah, what I would do is I just take the test and then I would go, oh, that was really bad. And I would restudy. I would study, take the test, and restudy. I would try to improve. Okay. Yeah, the link. Yeah, there's a link in the syllabus. I'm just looking at what y'all wrote. Yeah, they're multiple choice tests. You take them at home and you get comfortable and you get snacks and you take your time. Okay. Why? Because I want you to know this stuff. I don't want you to memorize it and then promptly forget it. Okay. The discussion question will be about something that's on our minds that we can go back and forth about it. I'll do some articles for you to read, and then we can ask questions about it and talk about that. Let's see what else. Let's see. Wednesday we can meet. Next week on Monday is Labor Day, so we don't meet. We have off. All right. So we have to meet on Wednesday. And then we'll figure it out as we go. Okay. So whatever, let me know, communicate with me so that I can help you, because I'm going to assume a lot and I shouldn't. And if I explain something to you in a way that seems kind of juvenile or seems kind of childlike to do, I want you to remember that not everybody grew up here. Not everybody had the same public school education. Where can you find the book? If you will click on the links in your module, it takes you directly to the book. It's an OpenStax. That's OPENSTAX, and they're from Rice University. They're a Rice publication, and it's a 3rd edition. And if you want to buy it, there's a link. When you click on that link, there'll be a little thing in the margin that says where you can buy it. And I want to say I paid $50 for it. I want to say that. I can't recall. If I find it on Amazon, oh, y'all want to be able to use student loan money for it, right? Let me look, and I'll see if I've got a link to make sure. Yeah, if we're looking at chapters 1 and 2, that's fine. But I want you to understand, one thing we don't do for ourselves is we read too quickly and we try to highlight everything. I want you to read it in smaller, more digestible pieces. And I want you to feel free to read it more than once. I cannot read. I'm not a photographic memory person. I have to write stuff out by hand. I have to type notes. If I'm going to learn something, I have to be really basic and fundamental about it. And I have to like get out the dictionary and look stuff up. Or I have to Google a term. And what I'd like for you to do is Google these key terms and concepts and work on the significance of them. You want to know, as if you were a journalist, the who, the what, the why, the when, the where, the how of something. You know, if you go about it that way and try to encourage curiosity for yourself, because gosh, I know that the school system can certainly take curiosity out of us, and this just becomes drudgery. I want you to find your curiosity about this. And if you don't know something, I'm not going to embarrass you about that. Ask me. You know, that's my job, is to tell you what this stuff means. But I am going to trust you to do the reading, and I am going to trust you to do the homework, that you're going to look this stuff up. Because look, you don't have to turn anything in to me. You just need to take a test and take 3 tests and do a discussion question. I don't believe in busy work and crossword puzzles and making a salt map and pretend you're writing the Constitution. No, I want you to read the real Constitution, and I want you to tell me why that document's flawed. You know, what's wrong with it and how do we fix it? Because it's all we got. Okay? All right, let's quit. It's good to meet y'all. Be safe. I'll see you Wednesday. Okay. And don't be afraid to jump in and do a little reading. Okay. I can assure you that it'll help you with insomnia. But it's a better book than what we could have used. Look at it that way. Look at it that way, that, well, there are worse textbooks out there. Okay. But I will lecture to you about stuff that is not in that book. Okay. Because I don't want to waste your time. I'm going to lecture to you about the background of the Enlightenment, which that textbook does not cover. All right, let's quit. Talk to y'all later. It's good to know you, and I will see you on Wednesday.
Nice meeting you, Professor. Have a great one.
Take care.